The long sleeve.
Contrary to the calendar, this is not a great course. Hopefully it will be a great course. This is my take, as opposed to an August faculty member on a DVD, my take on the Silk Roade. Before I start, I want to call your attention to a book that I just finished called Birds Without Wings. And if you were in the Ottoman Empire Great Course, you will find that this does an incredible job of going through kind of the death throes, if you will, of the Ottoman Empire. It's a novel, but it is historically right on. And the author is Louis de Bernays, who I think is supposed to be famous, but I don't know him. But anyhow, I recommend it very highly, particularly if you got interested in the Ottoman Empire over the last 2.5 years, however long it was. A little background to this. First of all, probably 80% of you or more know that I'm not a historian. People wonder how I venture off into things like history. I'm an epidemiologist, and there's a lot of stories there. But I got interested in the Silk Roade a little over 20 years ago. And it's one of those things, I don't know why. It just kind of happened. So I got interested in the Silk Roade. And then in 2005, I was at a conference in China and decided that maybe I could learn a little about the Silk Roade. There was a tour group from New Zealand who had done a Silk Roade tour starting in Central Asia and then going from there into China. So I joined that group in Kashgar and did the Chinese portion of the Silk Roade with them. And then was fortunate enough several years later to go and spend 3 weeks in the stands of this Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and including Turkmenistan, which now is extremely difficult to get into. I did that, and then I went back to Uzbekistan, I guess about 5 years ago now. So this really grew out of an interest that I had in art and architecture and history. And so what I've tried to do is to put together a series of lectures that go into what the Silk Roade was, the cities, the peoples, and so on. And I'm going to follow this up with another series of talks that are basically traveling in this part of the world now. So we'll go through this for 6 weeks, and then if you come back, we'll do 5 weeks of basically traveling the Silk Roade. That is looking at it now from a touristic perspective of what kinds of things you can see. So with that kind of background, I'll also point out there are 2 handouts in the back. One is the schedule of the lectures. The other is a series of maps, a set of maps, each of which kind of has a little something different to contribute to the geography. So basically, today I want to introduce the Silk Roade, talk about what it is, where it is, when it existed, and then who were the key characters in the story. The term Silk Roade was developed by a German geographer, von Richthofen, who was related to the Baron of Snoopy fame. And he coined the term Silk Roade, Siebenstrasse, in 1887 to designate a network of trade routes leading west out of China through Central Asia and through Iran, through Byzantium and Rome. You could also start the other end, but usually I kind of start in China and go westward. This network of routes then became probably the planet's most famous cultural artery for the exchange between East and West of a lot of a lot of different things. Religion, art, languages, new technologies, and of course trade goods. So basically, what we call the Silk Road, or Silk Roads, or Silk Routes, I usually use the singular, although there are multiple routes, served as a conduit for people, cultures, technologies, religion, and ideas in general. Well, there are lots of ways to potentially approach this, and I've kind of tried to take somewhat of a synthetic approach because it's kind of hard to figure out, what's the best way to address this? What's the appropriate focus? And what should the content be for basically 6 weeks, which could be considered either short or long, depending on how you look at it. Some of the complexities have to do with the fact that there's a wide variety of geographies and geographic and geologic conditions as you go along this way from basically China into the Mediterranean. There's a lot of climates, there are a lot of different cultures, and you will see over time that there's lots of people whose names we forget or never knew interacting here. And this is part of it. There's history of almost constant warfare between these different groups, between city-states and what became nations, leading to formation and subsequent dissolution of major empires. And we'll talk about some of those major empires and the impact that they had on the Silk Road. There were implications, both cultural and commercial, of the confrontation that we see between nomadic and sedentary societies. This is almost a constant theme in history. The settled and the wanderers, if you will. And this is clearly the case as we look at the Silk Road. And then the thing that got me first interested in this is the art and the architecture. And there's a lot you could spend, we could spend this whole 6 weeks on the art and architecture. I took a course at Ollie Osher Institute for Lifelong Learning in Atlanta, and he spent 8 weeks on the art, what he called the treasures of the Silk Road. So what I'm going to try to do is to take an overview that basically will focus on who are the people, what are the places where this was taking place, and what were the products. And products in the very broadest sense. Products including not only silk and paper and gunpowder and things like that, but products in terms of intellectual history. Some of you were here for the great courses on the Islamic Golden Age, and we'll be bringing in the ideas that were growing in Central Asia, particularly Bukhara, about this time. My interest and focus tends to be more on the eastern end of the Silk Road than the western. So a lot of the discussion will focus around what's happening in China and Central Asia as opposed to what's happening in the Mediterranean world, the other end of the Silk Road. And finally, contrary to the approach that people thought characterized the Ottoman Empire, we're not going to talk about a lot of dates, historical events, and kind of downplay the role of individuals. So where do we get our information on the historical Silk Road? Well, there were a lot of travelers, people who kind of wandered about from here to there. The motto for travel advisors, all who wander are not lost. A lot of these people got lost, but they wandered from Europe into the far reaches of Asia. They wandered from China to India. And so just a lot of people just plain traveling. There were geographers. There were people who were trying to fill in on maps, if you will, these large portions of the world, to develop maps that included things like where can you stay, where are fair amounts rise, what are the best routes around the various barriers to travel. There were historians, and historians go back to many, many years ago, and a lot of historians that talked about what was happening with regard to trade in both the eastern end and the western end of the Silk Road. There are also local documents, and we'll talk particularly about a document repository in Dunhuang in China, what's called the Library Cave, where there are documents that talk about, who bought how many heads of sheep for how much money and things like that. And then, of course, the role of archaeology in kind of discovering this vanished world. So we're going to talk about both history and geography. And history usually analyzes events over time, and geography analyzes them over space. So what we're talking about to a large degree is historical geography. And we're going to talk about trade, migration, the flow of technologies and ideas. And these are what really define and describe the Silk Road throughout its long history. The geographic scope of the Silk Road from the former Chinese capital of Xi'an in the east, which is considered traditionally kind of the eastern terminus of the Silk Road, to Byzantium, Istanbul in the west, again, usually considered to be the western terminus, although that's kind of a much oversimplified. It's probably, if you were flying it today on Tashkent Air or Uzbekistan Airways, about 4,200 miles. However, keep in mind the period we're talking about goes from almost a millennium BCE to about 1,500 CE. They weren't flying, they were traveling by foot, by horse, or by camel. So it's a long way. And one thing to keep in mind is that this is not something where you jump on one end, rode all the way across, and then got off on the other. Key is the movement of people and goods over short periods of space. So the number of people who went all the way from, say, Venice to Beijing, like Marco Polo, there were very few people like that. Most of it was short distance, and this brings up, we'll see this when we talk about the interest or the importance of intermediates and various groups who acted as middlemen. So if we look at the geography of the Silk Road, we will see that it's challenging. In addition, the geography, to a large degree, determines the patterns of human settlement and the interaction between populations. And one of the key questions is, why do we see pastoral nomadism in some places and not in others? What's the relationship between geographic features? Please don't leave the walker in the middle of the aisle. What's the relationship between the mountains, the deserts, and oasis cities? And then, importantly, you will see over the time period we're talking about, why do some cities thrive and others die? There are basically four major geographic regions that are embraced by the Silk Road. There are steppe lands to the north. There is semi-desert on the lower, what's called Sever River, and then there's just plain true desert from the Gobi in the east through deserts along the second major river, the Amagara. On the left bank is the Karakum Desert. That's the black sand desert. And on the right bank of the river, the Kazakum, which is the red sand desert. And then there's just all kinds of mountains. We've got the Tian Shan Mountains, the Altai Mountains, Trends, the Altai, and the Pamirs. So there's these four major regions. Here you see a map that depicts the two major rivers here. Here's the Sirdara here and there. This is steppe land here. Here's the Amagara. This is desert here, and then you can see that these rivers are fed out of the mountains to the south. The Sirdara formed the frontier between the settled civilizations, the settled communities, and the steppe land, the nomads to the north. There's a valley called the Fergana Valley, which is now part of Uzbekistan, which is the site of considerable, or has been the site of considerable ethnic unrest, is sandwiched between three sets of mountains, the Altai, the Transaltai, and the Pamirs to the south, and then the Tian Shan Mountains to the north. And then there are basically deserts to the east, or to the west, and east both from the valley. This shows the Sirdara River, the steppe lands off to the north, and then we'll be moving into the area below the river. This is the Amagara. This is the southern river, and you can see the broad expansive flatlands there, the two deserts, the Karakum. That's the red desert, and then the Kazakum, which is the black sand desert, and it's black and goes wherever. I had a driver that took me from Bukhara to Khiva, and then on up into Nukus in western Uzbekistan, and basically it goes forever like this. The roads are a little better than this, but you'll see that when we do the travel log in a few weeks. These are the Tian Shan Mountains in China. You can see a caravanserai here. Caravanserais we'll talk specifically about, but these were basically Motel 6 of the day, and played a key role in the ability of merchants to travel and both travel safely and exchange goods. These are the Pamir Mountains, and very high. These are high mountains. Not as high as the Himalayas, but they're very high. An interesting part of China is Xinjiang, the autonomous Uyghur Republic of Xinjiang, which is the far western part of China. And this area played a major role in the routes of the Silk Road. There's a large desert there called the Taklamakan, and that was a major geographic barrier to travel. Taklamakan is freely translated as "he who goes in will not come out." And I'll show pictures in just a minute. There are oasis cities that form a circular, semicircular path around the north, of the northern belt. These include Turpan and Kashgar, and then a southern route that includes Lowell and Naya. Under the Han Dynasty, Buddhism played a key role moving into this area, and this was kind of the major crossing point between Chinese and Central Asian and Indian cultures. These oasis cities were key for the development of arts, and we find art of the sedentary peoples that was being influenced by the art coming in from all directions, from Greek art. We'll talk a little bit about Alexander finding his way all into Central Asia about 300 something BCE. Persian art was very important, and then Indian art coming up from the southeast. And much of this then became syncretic and united by Buddhism. So here's the Taklamakan. That's what it looks like. Here's a typical oasis in Xinjiang. You can see the river and then the greenery along. Once you get away from that, basically you're in scabland, steppe or desert. So, thinking a little bit about the cultural geography and some of the things that we'll be talking about. We'll be talking about ideas including religion, but also science and philosophy. And the example here is the tremendous impact of Buddhism on this part of the Silk Road. I should go back and reiterate that my concentration is going to be on this eastern part, China and west of, or east of Iran or Persia. Technology. And we'll talk about technology that develops, particularly in China, and then finds its way westward. Two good examples of that are paper and sericulture, that is silk production. Art. We find particularly influences from Persia and India coming in with their unified art motifs of things like the tree of life motif, which is common in many of the carpets, for example, from both Central Asia and Persia. Unicorns, dragons, imaginary creatures and characters of all types. And then cultural geography, the key thing from our perspective is the trade that takes place. As I say, we're not going to talk just about trade. We're going to talk about ideas as well, but this is driven, if you will, I think to a large degree, it's safe to say, by trade, by the movement of goods in both directions. So we'll talk about what are the types of trade goods, where did they originate, and where did they go. So just some brief aspects of cultural geography we'll talk about. Well, I pointed out that although the singular term Silk Road is often used, there are in fact multiple routes. Particularly when we look at China, there are three major routes through China. There's the northern route that skirts the Taklamakan. There's the middle route that goes into the Taklamakan a short distance and then bifurcates. And then if we talk about the routes, not only are there multiple routes, but the routes carry with them hazards of many types. So there's lots of maps. The handout, as I mentioned before, if you came in late or didn't pick one up on the way in, there are two handouts. One's a schedule of the topics, the other is maps, and the different maps show different things, but they're basically showing the Silk Route, the people who traveled, or the people who lived there, and the people who traveled in the routes that they took. So there's lots of different maps. But to take this as an example, this is kind of the characteristic of, here's Xi'an here, we're going through, here's Dunhuang, and the southern route goes here, the northern route goes here, and they join here. This is Kashgar. Go through the mountains into what is now Uzbekistan, and then from there into Iran, up here. Once you get to into the Mediterranean region, you know, it shifts from overland to sea. There are some routes that go overland through Anatolia, through Turkey. Those are the main routes. There are also routes that go above the Caspian Sea here and down through Georgia and Armenia. But the major routes kind of go south of that. And then here you can see the route goes down here into India. A lot of variation in those areas. This focuses a little more closely on the Chinese and Central Asian parts. You see Xi'an here, here's Dunhuang, and then over here we get to into what is now Uzbekistan, in Persia, down here into Afghanistan, what's now Afghanistan, major city here, Kashgar, major bifurcation here, a place called Balkh. We'll talk about that, and I'll show all these places next week when we talk about the cities, and then on over into here. So with all these routes, the travelers' itineraries are around the Tarim Basin. That's the area to the north of the Taklamakan. Depending on what they were carrying, where they were going, and the political and physical environment at the time, and the economic conditions. Who was buying, who was selling, and what were the goods on offer. During the Han and through the Tang periods of China, the routes around the Taklamakan Desert and the Tarim Basin connected the Chinese capital Xi'an with the western frontiers of China. As I pointed out at Dunhuang, the routes diverged into 3 routes, northern, southern, central branches around this Tarim Basin. The northern route started at the Jade Gate outside of Dunhuang, then proceeded to the oasis city of Turpan, and from there it continued west along the southern foothills of the Tian Shan Mountains. This is a town called Kusha, and then on to Kashgar, where it connected with the southern route. The southern route also started at the Jade Gate, and then continued to oasis cities along the southern border there, such as Mira and Naya on the southern rim of the Taklamakan. They then followed the northern base of the Kunlun Mountains, went on to a town called Khotan, and then again ends up in Kashgar, where it meets the northern route. The southern route basically went into the Taklamakan to a place called the military garrison at Lowell, which is on Lopnor Lake, or was, it's no longer there. Then the branch diverged either to go to Meran down on the southern route or to another city on the northern route. So if we look at this, on the map, you can see this illustrated a little bit better, perhaps. Here's the J gate. So you've got this route that goes up here. You've got the central route that goes here, and then up here to Cash, or down here, and then the southern route. And over here, you see the city of Castro. So the Tian Shan Mountains here, skirting the southern border of the Tian Shan, the Shan here, and the Altai Shan here. These are the Altai Mountains. The Pamirs down in here, with these major routes. Here's this very large desert. And it's a sand desert. The Gobi Desert, if you're familiar with the Gobi Desert, which is up here, is a pebble desert, rock desert. It's entirely different. But here on the Taklamakan, you get those large sand dunes, like I showed you the picture. So if we start at the west, kind of looking at it from the reverse perspective, we've been heading west. Now we're west heading east. The overland routes led from the Mediterranean through Syria into Mesopotamia, Persia, and Merv, which is now in Turkmenistan, in Central Asia. And then at Merv, this was a point of bifurcation. Routes went south to Bactria in the Oxus Valley, or perhaps northward to Sogdiana, which is basically now Uzbekistan. And we'll talk about who all these people are, the Bactrians and Sogdians and so on. Then through the Fergana Valley that I mentioned before, across the Altai Range, and then on to Kashgar. There were also multiple, what we could call capillary routes through the Karakoram Mountains that directly link the Silk Road to East Central Asia with major arteries of the Indian subcontinent. So we've got all these routes going here and there, carrying all kinds of goods and people. Well, as I pointed out in an earlier slide, this was not a walk in the park. There were a number of different kinds of hazards. You've got weather. You've got in Turpan, in the Turpan Oasis, for example, it's one of the lowest places in the world. It also holds the records for the highest temperatures. So you've got mountains with snow, and so you've got a combination of bad weather and treacherous terrain. There's also an issue of limited resources. I mean, if you're talking about a camel caravan that's got, say, 200 or 300 camels, think about how much water that requires, how much fodder, let alone food for the people who are traveling in that caravan. So the question of availability of resources becomes very important. There were also bandits. You've got a caravan that's got basically what to the locals are rich people carrying really cool stuff, and so they are subject to attack by bandits. There's another hazard that becomes particularly important later on, and that's disease. And basically the Black Plague entered Europe via the caravan routes from Central Asia. Well, not only do you have that, but you've got local diseases as well. And if you think about, for example, the water sources these people had, you were drinking the same place your camel was, and somebody was defecating right upstream. So there were a large degree of, or a wide variety of diseases, exposures during the route. And then you got political instability. A lot of these people simply didn't get along. And so you have problems with conflict between the nomads coming in and sacking the cities. You got trouble between nomads fighting with each other over territory and so on. So there was a large degree of political instability that had an effect on the safety of travel. Well, it was basically based on caravans. There were very few people who basically wandered off on their own. If they started out alone, they joined a caravan. And the caravans for pack animals and for riding included horses and camels. They were merchants, and then we'll spend a whole session talking about who the people who were traveling. But there were pilgrims, there were monks, there were missionaries, all kinds of people that enjoyed these caravans. This is a painting. This is showing traders in Bukhara. It simply shows you their heavy laden animals. Also shows a chariot there, a wagon, but that's not characteristic of the caravan itself. The basic work animal of the caravan was the camel. And this is a quote from a Chinese historian in the 3rd century. The camel manifests its merit in dangerous places. It has a secret understanding of springs and sources. Subtle indeed is its knowledge. So camels are oftentimes referred to as the ships of the desert. They were of great significance in the history of silk because they could carry such large burdens. Camels were domesticated as early as the 4th millennium BCE, and by the 1st millennium BCE, they were depicted on Asian, Assyrian, and Archaean, Persian reliefs. The typical camel is the Bactrian camel, the two-hump camel, and that was one that was most common in Central Asia. They need very little food and water, and they can go for several days without water. If you've ever ridden a camel, you know that camels are kind of nasty, or can be nasty. They spit, they drool continuously. But they have special adaptations that allow them to travel through desert. These included adaptations of the eyes, the eyelid, the structure of the nose, and ears that protect them from the sands of the desert. The greatest virtue of the camel is its ability to carry large quantities of trade goods, up to 500 pounds, and they can carry, they can survive under these various conditions. They're cost efficient for carrying goods in comparison to roads or to carts, which require roads. The camel path is not necessarily suitable for a fixed wheel cart. And as I pointed out, they are sometimes cantankerous and have quite difficult personalities. In case you haven't seen a camel lately, this is a battery. I hope if we have a petting zoo again, I'm working on getting a camel this time. Roger and I are in cahoots on it. We need a Bactrian camel for a petting zoo here at the university. For those of you who are newcomers here, that's a casual aside that relates to the fact that we had a petting zoo a couple of years ago. So you've got the two humps on the Bactrian. Contrary to popular belief, those do not store water, they store fat. You can see the discussion here. It's got long eyelids or lashes to protect the eyes. It has a multi-chambered stomach and can digest a wide variety of things that you would think were not edible. They have a heavy, shaggy coat that protects them from the heat. And their feet are particularly interesting because they're very wide and flat, and they are able to therefore trudge through deserts. Camels were really important in China because people wanted them. and they became very important trade goods between the Han populations and the Xinyu. The Han were societal, the Xinyu were nomadic peoples, and we'll get into both of those later on. So camels were included in the animals that would be taken captive on a military campaign or sent as diplomatic gifts to objects of trade or objects for trade for silk. The camels were necessary for transporting army troops to the north and west, again requiring not so much for trade, but simply for the supplies from military troops. This is a historical picture of a camel caravan. This is what they really look like. And you can see there would be up to several hundred camels in a caravan. Well, not only were there camels, but there were horses. And horses were most commonly ridden. The camels served as the pack animals. The horses served for transport. This is a quote from another Chinese. The people of the Fergana Valley have many good horses. The horses sweat blood and come from the stock of the heavenly horse. The horses in Fergana Valley were oftentimes referred to as either heavenly horses or blood-sweating horses. They were a very special property of the Central Asian nomads, and they were widely prized on both ends of the Silk Road. That is, they were prized both by the Chinese and in Mesopotamia. Horses not only were important in the caravans, but also in warfare. And so the horse plays a major role in trade, but also in warfare. And then later on, chariots became very important for what are called the steppe warriors, the people who moved out of the steppes into Central Asia and then on into the Middle East, Near East. These are the early people called the Indo-Europeans. And basically, once the chariot came into use, it changed the dynamics of battle. And there's fantastic and very interesting literature on the relationship between the horse, chariots, and the spread of language, as well as warfare. Well, with the development of the light spoked wheel chariot in the second millennium BCE, horses became, again, useful to draw these military chariots. And the remains of these chariots have been found widely in Eurasia. A number of graves along the southern edges of the steppes. And then not only were horses used as for chariots, but they later were used as cavalry mounts. So the thought is that they were probably used for chariots before they were ridden. These are a couple of examples from Tang art of the heavenly horses, these horses from the Fergana Valley that were so widely prized. This is an armored horse for a warrior. And where did these people stay? Well, they stayed in caravanserais, and these were large walled complexes with small rooms for travelers. There were storerooms, storehouses for goods, and a courtyard for the transport animals. With the advent of Islam, beginning in about the 7th century and then reaching Central Asia in the 8th, fortified hostels for caravans were built where merchants and their animals could stay, their goods be protected. They were built as elements of trade policy and or philanthropy by governmental levels, but they were also built and endowed by wealthy people as part of the practice of Islam, where charity becomes very important. In open country, the caravanserais provided protection against marauders and bandits. They were usually a single-story building, single-wall building with like corners. There would be a central courtyard. There would be a water supply of some kind. There would be storage rooms for people to put their gifts, individual cells for merchants, and then this open courtyard provided a safe place for animals. Also, these were the points where exchange of goods took place between travelers coming from one direction and travelers coming from another, exchanging goods at that point. This is a diagrammatic representation of a caravanserai, and you can see there's a water source inside. There are cells along the edges. The animals would be placed inside, and then the people would stay in the cells, and this provided protection. Here is a caravanserai out in the open. Here is another example. Both of those are in Persia. In the urban setting, the caravanserais were a little bit different. They were generally a two-story building. They would be located along the main route, approaching a bazaar. And in the cities, the idea of protection against marauders was less important than it was out in the open areas. In the urban caravanserai, the primary function was basically as a secure depot or warehouse close to the markets. This shows you a reconstruction of a caravanserai with the courtyard water source there. This is an urban caravanserai in the city of Khiva. This is the caravanserai right here, single entrance, large courtyard, and then the cells for the merchants and their goods. That would be located close to a bazaar. Here's a bazaar. This is in Bukhara. In Bukhara, there are what are called trading domes, and this is a bazaar in one of the trading zones. I expect you to memorize this chart. We'll come back to this again and again, but basically it shows the major ethnic groups in the different areas over time. And we're going from about 400 BCE to the 1400s, which will be the major focus. Simply, this shows you that there are a lot of players, and we'll discuss probably about a dozen or so of these as we go over the next couple of weeks. There are three eras, and we'll look at these more in detail or in detail. The first era was from what we call prehistory to about 500 CE. This is the Roman Empire in the east, the west, the Han Dynasty in the east, and the key players are people like the Parthians, the Kushans, the Zongnuks, Argyns, many of whom were important middlemen. And this era included the movement of Alexander the Great from Macedonia into what is now Afghanistan. The second era is probably the high point of the Silk Road, and that goes from about 500 CE to 1100 CE. Here we get into Imperial China, several dynasties, important caliphates. This is after the origins of Islam, or Islam originated during this period. You've got major caliphates in Persia and the Mediterranean, the Umayyads and the Abbasids, and then you've got, in contrast to the Islamic republics, you've got the Christian Byzantine Empire in the west. The third era really sees us coming to the end of the high points of the Silk Road. We've got the Mongol Empire, well known with Genghis Khan, and the Timurid Empire with Tamerlane. The Silk Road probably really started historically as relationships trading relationships between the Xiongnu, the nomadic people, and the settled people of China began. And beginning in about the 2nd century BCE, large quantities of silk were sent on a regular basis to the nomads to keep them happy, to keep them attacking China, and in payment for horses. They were the source of the horses and camels that were needed by the Chinese armies, but also for trade. And this relationship then continued through time. The first millennium CE was kind of the heyday of Eurasian overland travel. Silk was only one of the things that was traded, as we'll talk a lot about. And both luxury and everyday goods were traded. Arguments have been made that, in fact, the long distance trade was of little economic importance. What was really important were short distance trades between centers, as opposed to things that went a long way. There's some discussion about that in the literature, that people are beginning to suggest that perhaps the long distance trade was not that important for continuing to support the Silk Road. And then we get all these, we get the Romans, the Parthians, the Sasanians, the Sogdians, these merchants in the various market towns, and the caravans arrive. And then the first real sustained interactions between the locals and migrants and Chinese were taking place down at the southern edge of that Taklamakan oasis in the cities of Naya and Lowell. I think we're going to have a specific lecture on this in two weeks. There were lots of travelers in addition to the traders and merchants that we usually think about. There were, as I said, travelers, there were diplomats, there were refugees, people who were moved from one place to the other by warfare. There were princess brides. One of the way people got their alliances was by trading your daughter to a local chieftain to try to ensure peace. There were religious figures, and we'll talk about some of the monks that wandered from China down into India to get back to the homeland of Buddhism. We got armies moving here and there, both from the west with the movement of Islam and from the east with the forces of Genghis Khan. You've got captive refugees. One of the things that would happen in a battle would be when a defeat was suffered, they killed off a lot of people, but they would usually save the artisans. You got a potter, you got a stonemason, you got a scribe, and those would be captured and then taken back to wherever the people originated. And then finally, one of the uninvited travelers on the Silk Road was the Black Death. And we'll talk specifically about how that moved from Central Asia into the Mediterranean, and then from there throughout Europe. So that's today. That's where we're going to go. I would be glad to try to answer any questions. I've used up more time than I thought I would, but any questions are more than welcome. Thank you. And if somebody could get the lights, yeah, Judy. And I'll repeat questions. I don't have a portable mic. Judy.
Do you have any idea how far a camel could walk in a day?
That's a very good question. How far can a camel walk a day? The estimate is about 25 to 30 kilometers. And that's the spacing at the heyday of the Silk Road. The caravans were that close together, about 25 or 30 kilometers. Very good question. Yeah, Ann?
So, do you think the caravans left on a regular schedule? Okay.
Did they leave on a regular schedule? They left when there were enough people and enough goods to go. It's kind of like, it used to be, if you were taking a ferry, someplace, a local ferry, where you sat in the end of the ferry dock until there were a couple of cars that were ready to go. And that's the way the caravans were. They would be assembled, and then once you got kind of a critical mass, they would go over. That's my understanding.
And did they have to pay?
That's a good question. I don't know. I assume that
What was
they.
the question?
No, sorry. The question was, did they have to pay to be a member of the caravan? I don't know. I've never seen any reference to that. Yeah, John?
Were soldiers posted at these caravanserais like forts?
The question was, were soldiers posted at caravans like forts? No, they were not. There were garrisons. So there would be a military garrison, say in Dunhong, in other areas, but there would be guards, but there would not be military postings. That's true.
Do you have any sense of the height of the various mountain ranges from Everest at 27,000 to, the Cascades?
Well, some of the caravans were going through passes at 15,000 feet. Yeah, I mean, you're basically in the Palmares, you're at the roof of the world. Yeah.
What kind of money was used on the way through the Silk Road?
What kind of money was used? There were local coins, and to a large degree, there was Chinese cash. The Chinese tried to use paper money, and that didn't work. A lot of it was based on Persian dirham. There was not a common currency that was used. It would be like Europe before the euro. A wide variety of things. And these guys were shrewd. They knew the exchange rate. And at every point when goods changed hands, the price would be marked up. So, you've got a bolt of silk that starts in China at 200 yuan. Well, by the time it gets to Antioch, it's probably 1,000. Simply because of the number of times it changes hands, and everybody gets a cut. Yeah, Kathy?
Were the jurisdictions that they were traveling through trying to tax them?
Yes. The question was, were the jurisdictions trying to tax them? They would pay a fee to stay at the caravanserai, and that would be the form of the tax. Yeah. Good questions. Yes.
How did the Europeans accept this creation of the Silk Road?
Oh, they loved. The question was, how did the Europeans accept the creation of the Silk Road? They loved it because they wanted silk. I mean, silk was a luxury good. And so if nothing had traveled other than silk, the Europeans would have been happy as clams. And when we get into the movement of silk, we'll see that once Europeans began to be able to make silk, the things died down.
But there was no threat. I mean, I've read stuff about the fear, not just of the Ottoman Empire, but of what did these nomadic tribes doing on the Silk Road? And all the way through.
Well, that's a long question. I'm not sure it's a question. What were these nomadic tribes doing on the Silk Road? Well, they were basically trying to survive. Some of them would trade. They would trade goods. That was the interaction between the cities and the nomads. So I'm not sure how that relates to your question about.
Was it a threat? I mean,
Well, what was what a threat?
the very existence of the Silk Road, beyond trade, and trade was really focused on, but there was a concern, the difference between the civilizations of the East and Central Asia in Europe. Fairly substantial.
I guess the question is, was the Silk, there's always a threat between peoples. It's always the us versus them. Whether or not the Silk Road exacerbated that, I don't know. It could have, but it also provided a way for people to exchange goods. I don't think the Silk Road per se would be perceived as a threat. The threats were the people who were there.
Was it ever used for migration?
Was it used for migration? Well, you had refugees going back and forth. There were sorry, the question was it ever used for migration? I don't think it was primarily a migration route, but clearly you had people who were migrating along the route. That makes any sense. Yeah, Judy?
I would imagine that there was not water every 30 kilometers. How did they carry their water?
Well, they would have water skins, but the caravanserais, one of the things that they had was water. So they would be built at a water supply. Good questions. Okay, if you did not get the handouts, they're available in the back. And then next week, I'll have a handout that provides a doc to kind of discuss the district. Okay, thank you.